Joe Alt is a name that seems to get brought up a ton, and for good reason. He is a phenomenal offensive line prospect, and when the Jets were losing a lot of games, it seemed like the consolation prize was going to be they would be in prime position to draft Joe Alt.
Yeah.
They win a couple games at the end of the year. They end up with the 10th pick in the NFL draft. And at pick number 10, it is extremely unlikely that Joe Alt makes his way there. But there's been some rumblings of him falling a little bit. And what I mean by falling a little bit is like not a guaranteed top 5 pick, but somewhere in the top 10. And now there seems to be a debate whether or not the New York Jets should trade up for Joe Alt. Jets Twitter legend Connor Rogers, who hosts a podcast with Trevor Sikkema, the NFL draft, the NFL Stock Exchange. They were doing a 3-round mock draft. It's a 2-hour mock, but I was watching it. And in their scenario, they had Joe Alt fall at pick number 8, and the Jets traded up for him. They gave up a 2025 second-round pick to go from 10 up to 8 to grab Joe Alt. So, Jeremy, let's get this rocking and rolling. What are your thoughts on a potential Alt trade up?
Well, yeah, obviously, the first thing that we need to know, and we're going to know in a week, is who are we signing in free agency. If we sign a guy who has, somebody, one of the free agents that has experience at left tackle, that we're comfortable with at left tackle, then I don't see any reason to trade up for Joe Alt. And that's because there's a lot of really high quality tackles in this draft. I think the issue is that only one other tackle really you could really count on or feel comfortable playing left tackle. So, and that's Fashanu. But between Fuaga and J.C. Latham, there's some really talented plug and play type tackles in this draft. I think those 4 are arguably all plug and play tackles. So I don't know why we would have to give up trade capital. I understand that Joe Alt is fantastic. He's clearly above the rest of the pack. I don't know if it's worth a second-round pick if we already signed a tackle, signed somebody in free agency that can play left tackle. If we didn't, then I think the question is, how much do they like or dislike Fashanu?
Yeah, it's a good point with Fashanu, because it is going to be contingent on what happens in free agency, because they could very well go out, and I'm just using as the example, but let's say Tyron Smith for the example, who that veteran left tackle, where he's going to play on opening night. And then suddenly you're okay with drafting someone, as you mentioned, like a Fuaga or a JC Latham, someone who's played on the right side of the offensive line, and you don't have to worry about trading up. But if they don't do that, let's say they're either signing guards and their plan is to have Elijah Vera Tucker at tackle, or they sign someone like a Mike Onwenu, who's just pretty much a right side of the line kind of guy, either right guard or right tackle, then it opens up a hole on the left side. And as you mentioned, we know Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu can do it. We don't know. It is a gamble if JC Latham, Talisi Fuaga, any of that next batch of guys can do it, because they'd have to make the switch from the right side to left side. I am willing to consider that idea of trading a 2025 second round pick to move up in the first round to get a bona fide number 1 left tackle, best left tackle in the class. I think he has the highest ceiling of the group. I also think he has the highest floor of the group. And the Jets in a win now window could benefit from both, one, having the highest ceiling guy and having the highest floor guy as well. So I understand why where you're coming from on being apprehensive about moving the draft capital next year to go up and get a guy, but I think it's going to be dependent on what happens. And if there's still a hole at left tackle,
Oh yeah,
I think that it becomes that much more. I don't know if likely is the right word, but it makes a little bit more sense if there is, there's no veteran left tackle brought in.
yeah, it's a lot more understandable. Unlike some of the things we put up as our topic, our reality check, because it's not realistic at all. This is a little different, where this is definitely worth a discussion. And I think if we don't feel the need, if we go into the draft and we don't feel the need, and my line in the sand is you can't impact this year's draft. Like, we need that 3rd round pick. because we have needs. People don't realize that it's not just that we, even what we do in free agency, we need a defensive tackle, and that's real. That's not fake. We really have to see what we do before the draft. But I think that third round pick, whether it's going to be the best center or interior offensive lineman, whether it's the best defensive tackle, whether it's to groom your future number 2 wide receiver or whatever it is, it's going to be an important pick. If you tell me second round 2025, I could live with if we don't sign a left tackle, and Joe Alt is the guy, man. I mean, he is the safest, most solid pick you can make. He shores up the position for us for 10 years. And we would have time to, I guess, repack that second round pick in 2025, right? There are guys we might lose. People are talking about Bryce Huff, a team that wants the edge on him. They want to trade with us in a sign and trade. Whatever it is, we might be able to recoup that second round pick for next year. There's a lot of time to do that. So I'm not totally against it. I just think it depends on free agency.
Yeah, it is going to be very contingent on what happens in free agency, I think anyway, with the offensive line. And look, they're going to they're going to have to be active in free agency on the offensive line, whether we like it or not. Like, yes, ideally you're getting someone in the NFL draft, developing them, and they're on a cheap contract. I think you need a mix of both this year. Trying to fill 3 holes is very, very challenging to do only through the draft. And same thing can be said about only in free agency. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Jets have to fill all 3 spots in free agency and then they go out and draft a Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze or whatever at pick number 10. I don't think that's really realistic either. I think it's going to be a little bit of a balance where they're trying to fill it with both free agent band-aids as well as the NFL draft, whether it's at pick 10, moving up, or as we've discussed in the past as well, moving back.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when you think of free agencies, they're band-aids, whereas the guys you get through the draft are hopefully guys that stay for years. And in the long run, you eventually want to have an offensive line of guys like that, guys that you've built, you've selected, developed. They have years together. I mean, that's what we really want. We don't have a choice. There's no way to make that happen this year. So we're going to need some band-aids. But the more draft guys we draft that end up becoming starters for our team, the better I think we are, for the future.